puts up a three. And goal!
Bearcat Blitz. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Happy holiday, of course. And unfortunately, the Bearcats will not be dancing for a 6th straight year and 5th straight NCAA tournament. But we have news on where they will be dancing to in terms of their postseason tournament and what's next for the Bearcats basketball program, along with some rumblings about a potential major addition to the program's staffing. I'm Russ Eltman. He's Neil Meyer. We got you covered on that to start this week's Bearcat Blitz episodes presented by Bet Online as part of the Believe Network. Neil of Rivals Cincinnati site, thefrontofficenews.com, and I am from Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Check us out at those two mediums. We'll touch on the basketball side of things, and then we'll get Neil's thoughts on the Friday football action and a new role added to the staff of the Cincinnati football program. A lot to touch on this week's show, and I won't spend any more time getting to the preview. I want to tell you first, before we get into the action, about Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. And Neil, I hope you busted out your crown for this week's edition of shows, as that's where the Bearcats are headed, set to take on DePaul in the first round of the inaugural first edition ever of the College Basketball Crown. The event takes place from March 31st to April 6th. There's a long layoff between now and the start of the tournament, a 16-team field with games being played at the MGM Grand Garden Arena and T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. The semifinal and final happening at T-Mobile Arena. And Cincinnati is firmly in the field, Neil. They are taking on DePaul for the first time since 2013 on April 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern on FS1. And then they would then play on April 3rd at 7 and in the Crown Final Four on April 5th at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Cincinnati plays the winner of Oregon State and UCF, and then would play the champion of these four teams in the Final Four, and that would be Colorado, Villanova, Tulane, and USC, the best of those four in the bottom of the bracket, and Cincinnati, DePaul, Oregon State, and UCF in the top of their bracket. Mr. Meyer. Neil, you're muted.
Yeah, it's pretty important to think about how things kind of played out on Sunday, right? After Selection Sunday, the Crown came out early this morning with their bracket of 16 teams. And Russ, obviously, a lot of things stand out. First of all, we're talking Big 12 basketball, right? It's only fair to say that West Virginia not only got snubbed from the NCAA tournament, but overall in general aspect of this. But when you look down at the Crown bracket, right, for Cincinnati, obviously people are disappointed that they're even playing in this tournament because of the expectations and what was kind of set for Cincinnati this season, especially reaching as high as number 14th in the country. Many people expected them at one point to be playing in the big dance that would take place later this week, but instead, here we are just a couple months later in the middle of March, and they're now playing deep into April, but this time it's not for the NCAA tournament. It's for a whole new tournament sponsored by Fox and the Crown. And Russ, the biggest thing to take away from this is obviously when you look at the field and you dig into the Crown basketball tournament, you look down, you see you get two teams from the Big East, Big 10, and Big 12 automatically, but 5 Big 12 teams making it, and West Virginia, not one of them. Overall, it's safe to say that a lot of people were not expecting to be in this position to play in this tournament, but Cincinnati now lines up in the opening game of the Crown on day 2 on April 1st out there in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand, and it's going to be interesting to see how this thing really plays out.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot to say on this, Neil. Like, it'll be cool to see Cincinnati and these guys play some more basketball, especially Simas Lukosius, Aziz Bandago. Fans get to see them in action a little bit more, but nice. You made the college basketball crown. Awesome. The season is an abject failure. 1,000%. That's all you can say. It was an unmitigated disaster of a failure that they just wet themselves down their legs in across the month of January. It was a far too much of a disastrous month for them to be able to recover fully. And then they didn't do enough down the stretch of the end of February and March to put themselves in the expected position of making the NCAA tournament, a program that has far more money, more resources, and more access to talent than a program like, say, Xavier. And who's dancing this year, Neil? The Musketeers, after their loss to Cincinnati in the most recent crosstown shootout. So, I mean, Neil, we'll preview. We don't have to touch on this very heavily. I mean, we got 2 weeks until these games start, and we'll preview the DePaul matchup probably at the end of next week's episodes to get people ready for that game, or we might do it on the Monday before the actual game against the DePaul Blue Demons. But bottom line is, Neil, this is if you are a team anywhere close to what you thought you would be this season, then you go and win this tournament. Go and win something. That's all I have to say about this program. Show that you can win something. Show that you can win 4 games in a row against good competition. Show that you can do it, because, Neil, that hasn't really happened in the Wes Miller era, and it's time for it to start happening sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest thing too, Russ, is obviously you want to go out and win this tournament, right? You guys elected to play in this postseason tournament for a reason. Not only did you have the obligation to, but you going out there and you're playing for a purpose, right? This is an NIL-based tournament where the winner gets a select allotment of money towards NIL. And if you're a Cincinnati fan or supporter out there, you got to be pretty happy with an opportunity to go out and add more NIL to the program, especially seeing most of these schools and NIL be jumping across the thing in the new landscape of college athletics. But like you mentioned, Russ, too, this was not what they expected, but you got to put it together and try to go out there and win this thing, right? You got to put together 3 games in a row, and it's going to be interesting to even see what roster might get put out there on April 1st, especially with the transfer portal opening up on the 24th. This game being a whole week later. It's going to be interesting. Now, we might see some changes. We don't know yet, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But for Cincinnati, if you're going to go out here and you're going to accept the tournament bid like this in the Crown, you're going to have your best lineup and you're going to play to win it. And right now, you're looking at the bracket, Russ. I mean, DePaul, a team that struggled in the Big East, like, overall, this is a tournament where Cincinnati could single-handedly go into this tournament and win it all, right? They've already beat UCF. I mean, Villanova was a very close game. You would like to get your get back versus them after your non-conference loss, but overall, you smacked Utah on the opposite side of the bracket. You smacked Arizona State. This is a tournament, Russ, where it's single-handedly Cincinnati.
UC should think they're the best team in this tournament, Neil.
Correct.
That's what
they should go
think.
into this thing thinking they are the best tournament in this bracket field. And if you're asking me, Russ, I firmly believe they are. But they got to play like it. They got to play like what we saw in non-conference where everything was clicking for them. But if they played like how they played in January, and Russ, I'm honestly very worried about this matchup because, A, you have a 3-hour time difference, and that game is a Tuesday afternoon, a random Tuesday afternoon in Las Vegas. So overall, there's a lot of things to look forward to in this game. And
this staff make their players compared to a DePaul team, which I'll look it up right now, but much more
DePaul already saw one guard hit
postseason
the portal.
Tournaments. Did they already have somebody hit the portal?
Yeah, Jacob Meyer hit the portal again, who was one of the most highly sought after guys this past portal cycle. Local Cincinnati kid from Covington hit the portal after starting at Coastal Carolina. He's already announced his intentions to hit the portal again, so they're going to be without a guard who is averaging 10 and 4, so backup guard, but overall, they're already down one of their key players.
Right. We'll see what Chris Holtmann can do, former Ohio State head coach, a guy that I wouldn't take lightly, Bearcats fans. Bearcats cannot take this 14-19 DePaul Blue Demons team lightly because, like we've seen what happens when they take fellow power conference teams lightly, things don't end well. and they got to figure out a way to get motivated for this tournament, which I'm sure they will be. The Bearcats have guys that love playing basketball. They love playing hoop. It was a theme of wanting it too much at points this season for reasons why they fell short. So that is that on the Crown basketball tournament getting going on April Fool's Day. Fitting for what Bearcats fans are feeling and experiencing with this program over the past 5 to 6 years. Neil, GM hire possible. We are hearing rumblings of a possible GM hire from the Trilly Donovan Burner Ball Discord. No word yet on the exact name. There's some names floating around out there that of who it might be. But Neil, overall, as we close out this segment, a massive, massive chance for Cincinnati to bolster its staff and take some of the responsibility and just overall workload off the shoulders of Wes Miller. I think this would be a beautiful addition and a really smart way to continue trying to be the best possible power conference program you can be.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And like you mentioned too, obviously we're not going to say any names, but there have been some rumblings. And if this is the potential hire for Cincinnati, this is a hell of a hire for Wes Miller. It takes a lot off of his back in terms of the NIL aspect. Someone who's highly sought after in the basketball community, has a very great resume. And in the new landscape of college athletics, you want a guy who's done it at every level. And that's something that could be on the table for this person. So overall, this could be a slam dunk hire for Wes Miller, especially in the new landscape of college athletics in terms of NIL and everything. This is a young guy who has done it so well in this profession, has been all over the country, has a great resume, like I mentioned. It could be a slam dunk hire for Wes Miller if this goes through.
We shall keep our ears and eyes peeled on that front. Taking a quick break and then getting to just the rough numbers for Cincinnati Bearcats basketball after the latest miss of the NCAA Tournament 2025 edition. Quick out segment here, but the Bearcats slated to play in the college basketball crown, the first ever college basketball crown. And Neil, it's a congrats to the Bearcats for getting into a postseason tournament once again. 13 of the past 15 seasons they have played in a postseason tournament, obviously with COVID keeping everybody away from the postseason in 2020. But Neil, when you dive into the numbers further, they haven't been playing in the postseason tournaments fans want to see them in. They have not appeared in the NCAA tournament in any of the past 6 years, any of the past 5 tournaments, and they are right among the longest active Power 5 NCAA tournament droughts in the entire country now. It goes to Paul at 21 years, Boston College at 16, Stanford at 11, Cal at 9, Utah at 9, Wake Forest at 8, SMU at 8, Butler at 7, and then tied for 9th with 6 years in a row not dancing is Cincinnati, UCF, Washington, and Minnesota. Neil, I mean, outside of Butler, UC is a completely different entity when it comes to historic success, historic expectations, and historic consistency year to year when it comes to making the NCAA tournament. You rarely see a program like this be included on lists like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you mentioned too, Russ, I mean, you look at a program that has had sustained success over the last few years, right? Dating back to 1990. I mean, look how much success this program has had. This is a program that is built on getting to the NCAA tournament, playing deep into March, winning games at home, winning games on the road, right? Having that kind of record in that kind of season. But Cincinnati is now eclipsing territory where that drought is now approaching top 5 in all of college basketball after failing to make the NCAA tournament for the last 6 years. Overall, Russ, I mean, things are going to have to change, right? Especially if you win the crown, right? You get your momentum going. But Cincinnati had a lot of hope heading into 2024, 2025, but it's safe to say you could have the best roster on paper, but just overall it doesn't click, and that was the case for Cincinnati this season. But overall, something's going to have to change in order for Cincinnati to get over this hump and find the way to get back to the big dance. And hopefully it is 2025, 2026 after failing to make it this past year.
With you there, Neil. We will definitely see how they put together the roster and how they change and learn lessons. That was the big theme of Wes Miller's final press conference at the Big 12 tournament. I'm sure we'll hear from him either this week, most likely next week, in anticipation of the Crown trip. But just learning lessons from these two Big 12 seasons and making sure that you have every stone turned and every box checked in the transfer portal, these all important months over the next 2 to 3 months of putting together the right roster balance to win consistently in the Big 12. Have yet to, correct me if I'm wrong here, Neil, right? They're yet to win 4 consecutive games in Big 12 action. In the 3 games win streak, the only one that they have in Big 12 play was against not so great competition, with 2 of those wins coming at home. So have to find a way to build the right roster that can consistently get you on winning streaks in Big 12 play, to not have to chase and try to play catch up all down the back 6 weeks of each conference season. News on the football front. We'll get to that right now before we take a break and get Neil's thoughts on the Friday action of spring practice. A new doctor joining the ranks for Cincinnati Bearcats football, a director of sport performance in Dr. Jason Stone joining the team as part of Scott Satterfield's staff. He is going to, quote here directly from the press release released by Go Bearcats Football, help with the full integration of performance training and recovery over all facets of the program, developing individualized plans for each student athlete. Stone will manage all data collection and analysis, including the use of Catapult, which captures every player's movement in practice and games. Neil, looks to me like another good idea by the Bearcats football program, another good hiring to bring in a guy that can kind of decipher all these numbers a little bit quicker, a little bit cleaner, and a little bit more sustainable, not sustainably, but efficiently is what I'm looking for. And kind of just put a name on the actions of sport performance, of player tracking data, all that good stuff. He comes from a background. He got his doctorate at West Virginia, also spent most recently, came over as the applied sports science manager with the Cincinnati Reds most recently, and was a sports science researcher with Ohio State as well. So a lot of good spots on this guy's resume, Neil, and it looks like I would say solid hiring and a nice addition to the staff and the day-to-day machinations of this Cincinnati football program that is going into a state-of-the-art sport performance facility in just a couple months. Yeah,
Russ, personally, once we saw the news of this hiring this early this morning, I think it's a great hire, because not only do you have somebody with a high-quality resume in Jason Stone, you bring him to a collective group of guys like Aaron Himmler, Associate AD of Sports Medicine, then Director of Football Sports Performance, Nico Palizzetti. He's getting the opportunity to come in and work side by side and hand in hand with 2 of the best professionals in the business, both in their respective categories. Obviously, we've seen the job Aaron Himmler has done, but we've also seen the job that Nico Palizzetti has done too. So Jason Stone could come in and make a huge impact and help those guys take the new technology and everything to the next level for Cincinnati. I think it's a great idea too, Russ, because like you mentioned, the new football facility, there's going to be a lot of ins and outs of that football facility with the recovery, all the new assets in there, especially the recovery aspect. I mean, you got the cold tubs, you got the recovery lounges. Those are going to be 2 huge assets. And on top of that, you're going to need as many hands as you can on deck when you have 200, 250 athletes coming into that indoor practice facility each and every day, but yet alone 120 of those coming on the football aspect of things.
Modernizing, leveling up, new buildings going up, exciting times for Bearcats football. We'll see if they can spin that excitement into 6+ wins this fall. And Neil got a good look at how they're trying to do that with some more practice action on Friday. They're on spring break this week, so no practice reports or anything to come your way on this podcast until next week, but we'll give you the taste that you're all looking for after this break on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, your top thoughts, just overall takeaways from Friday's practice session in the morning. Beautiful morning at Nippert Stadium. A beautiful week of weather to start off the spring football period. Obviously, the big highlight of the day was the Caleb Goody one-handed catch in the end zone in one of the team periods. But floor is yours, my man. Take it away.
Yeah, that's a good touching point, right? Russ, obviously you mentioned Caleb Goody, and that was a hell of a catch in the back corner of the end zone. Obviously, many have saw the post, but overall, he looks as smooth of a route runner as Cincinnati has seen at that wide receiver position. He is quick. He's in and out of his breaks. He's really impressed me over the first few days of spring football. But overall, Russ, that wide receiver room, it's low-key night and day from where it was a season ago, especially at this point. I mean, Caleb Goody standing out.
Think about where we were 2 years ago in spring ball compared to where we are today with that wide receiver room. It is wild how much it's changed.
Correct. And I mean, on top of it, Caleb Goody's impressed, to say the least. But on top of it, Jeff Caldwell is a unit at that wide receiver position. Like, Russ, I was standing there, sitting there, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, looking down at the roster, I'm like, 6'5", 210. I'm like, yeah, he's built like that. And I mean, you look at the wide receiver position, and there's not going to be many DBs that kind of cover him. Just to say he's a freak athlete. I mean, we've talked about it. We've heard he broad jumped 11.6 or 11.9. Like, think about that. At 6'5", that would have been the third highest in the combine this year. He's a freak, man. And you just have to look at him, and you're like, yeah, this dude's going to go out here and make plays. I think he could be an impact player for the Bearcats in that wide receiver room. But overall, Tony Johnson's leadership also needs to be discussed because, Russ, he's the only returning wide receiver from a season ago that saw significant time. I know him and I talked after it. That was my post-practice interview. He said he's really taken on that leadership role, and you can kind of see him getting a little bit more vocal, trying to take on that leadership, obviously being that veteran guy, that fifth-year senior in that room. So that's a great sight to see. Gianni Contosis does not look like a freshman, to say the least. He's out there making plays, a big body wide receiver as well. Could be a guy that comes in and makes an impact there as well. But then overall, those two look good for Cincinnati. But on top of it, it was great to see Antoine Peak back on the field after missing the final few games of last season. Great to see that. But the offensive line, man, Russ, this offensive line looks completely different than what this season looked like last year. And the returning guys, they got some legit size up there on the offensive line. And I'm looking down at the roster as we speak. I don't think there's an offensive lineman under 6'4", 6'5" on this roster. So, I mean, you look at the Big 12, right? You want those big, taller offensive linemen, and that's the model that Nick Cardwell and Scott Satterfield and this team are adopting, whether that's in the transfer portal, whether that's in the high school ranks. They're looking for those bigger, athletic offensive lines. And, Russ, some of those hits that they've gotten in the transfer portal and the high school ranks, they're going to be playing off early, especially after only returning two guys from a season ago in that offensive line, and Gavin Gerhardt and DeAndre Buford.
Good stuff there from Neil. Good report, and we will have more from both of us. We'll be at practice throughout next week. 3 sessions slated to be open to the media, and we are excited about all that. In the week preceding the Crown Tournament, yes, it's a 2-week layoff, full 2-week layoff. Everybody, you get your full taste of March Madness action before all that. Make sure to check out betonline.ag to make all your wagers on March Madness over the next few weeks. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. We'll be back at it again on Thursday for another edition of Bearcat Blitz presented by Bet Online. Enjoy the rest of your start of the week, everybody. Thanks for listening or watching.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.